We'll start the meeting briefly, but we are streaming right now. We'll let everyone know. So
I can hear you.
good. We're gonna test the chairs. So just a second.
I like them. Yes, thumbs up for trees. Is that you weren't looking for thumbs up?
You don't know what I'm talking about.
The pile of trees. Yeah, I did ask someone, but I never, sorry.
No, you're totally fine.
I never followed back up, so thanks for that.
So
But I do think they need to come or a safely stacked or something.
yeah, stack them. You would have like
Yeah.
a landslide.
Yeah.
They're too big.
I was talking to our arborist this morning, but he forgot to say, hey, remember that email I sent you like 2 weeks ago?
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that? So I'll follow up.
Yeah.
I gotta go
And
back.
I sent you pictures.
Yes, I have the pictures. I forwarded them on.
Oh, good.
Love pictures.
Yeah,
Honestly,
they're
it's
still
great.
Still there.
Are we close to starting? I just want to re-close the door. Yes.
Now, just a trigger step. We're gonna talk.
It was like, I was like,
Just go like a down. Look at my property, we have construction.
Yes.
yeah.
Well done.
Very well.
Is it serious here? Is someone here?
How did I know? I was like, how did I?
Yeah.
I don't mean, I go to all the main streets and not rounds.
Right.
I need my tables.
No, I have to run it from the browser because they.
That's what I mean.
So here it is. This is my aunt.
Like remind us who we are.
Or remind ourselves.
Where am I? Where am I? Right.
What
am I supposed to be doing?
Yeah.
Yeah. You can get it better.
Like, there's a lot of pressure
She
on
has something that's not.
can't emphasize it.
Like, sure.
Mugs.
Okay, I love those.
We're just stuffy.
Yeah.
Bo, can you see the PowerPoint?
I can.
Okay, good. We'll just keep it up there for now.
Can you open it in this slide?
Well,
Or
not not on the browser because,
no worries.
yeah, see, there's no, do you see it in presentation mode?
Next to editing, top right. The right.
Present next to.
Oh, there it is. I'm used to having it over here.
Yeah.
Here we are.
There you go.
Now we can see it. That's neat. All right. Do we all just want to go around the room and say who we are? Or yeah,
Who
just
are we?
yeah. I'm Lynn Schroeder. I'm the coordinator.
Carol Brent, the council liaison to this project.
Mary Carlson, I live in Robinwood, 2 blocks off of 43.
Spencer Crandall, Westland citizen.
Shatri Craig from the Westland Chamber of Commerce.
Christine Lewis, Atlanta resident, Metro Counselor.
David D. Jones and Planning Commission.
Matt Hasty, MIT.
Brandon Crawford, MIG.
Chris Myers, city staff, project manager.
And Bo, do we have you online?
Bo Jano, Westland resident, innocent bystander.
And Bo, you're the only one we have online right now. That I can tell.
Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. Okay.
One of our colleagues, Matt Bell, may join, should join probably later.
Cool.
Or at some point, so maybe
He's going to join virtually.
he's gonna join virtually.
Great.
Is Tanner gonna make it or?
He will at best make it at 2:30. So Matt is going to run the meeting and just go from there. But yeah, something came up and he can get here by about 2:30, he thinks.
Yeah, so I think first order of business is, do we need to approve minutes from the last meeting?
We didn't put that on
See
the.
it on there, yeah.
Robert.
Who's
Who's this Robert guy?
We can always do it at the.
Yeah, we could always stack them in the next one after that.
All right, well then we will head sort of straight into the presentation. I'm gonna start things off and kind of tag team in with Brandon. So in terms of the agenda, we'll give you an update on where we are in the process, what we've been doing, where we are. We'll give a quick overview of what we heard from the third survey we've done as part of this project. I'll cover that and then hit and just to add whatever I may leave out. And then we're going to talk about some zoning concepts. Brandon will cover that piece. And then transportation improvement recommendations or initial ideas. And if Matt Bell is here, he will cover that. I will cover it. And then next steps. And at each step along the way, we have some specific discussion questions for y'all. So we'll kind of present the information on a given topic. And then we'll ask some questions and have some discussion. I think we're scheduled for 2 hours, so hopefully we've got enough time to get through everything, but at some points we may kind of move ourselves along. We feel like we're getting a little behind the, so, does that sound good?
Yes, sir.
All right. So project status in terms of what we've done since we last met. Again, conducted survey number 3. So we'll talk about the results of that, ask people about some of the corridor concepts, some of the visualizations, and some specific questions around development standards, potential development standards in these areas. And then we started drafting, we drafted a memo describing zoning concepts and also looked at just consistency with this project and the goals and objectives we've developed with this project, consistency with the city comprehensive plan policies. So we've got a memo that kind of combines both of those things. We took the earlier kind of focus area boundaries that we had, and we translated those into actual potential mixed use zoning boundaries. We made some tweaks a little bit. Those were pretty amorphous, kind of blobby. So now they follow property lines. In some cases, they're a little larger than the earlier boundary. So we'll talk more about those at that point. And then we worked with our colleagues at Kittleson and Associates to describe different types of bicycle, pedestrian, vehicular improvements with a focus on the bike and ped improvements in this area, both with a sort of large focus on getting people to the corridor. There's already a kind of a plan in place for what the facility, Highway 43 facility itself would look like, but we focused on getting to and across Highway 43 as well, kind of where we think pedestrian crossings might make the most sense. So we'll talk more about all of that when we get to that point. So that's what we've been doing since we last time. Sound good? Any questions on all that? Okay.
I just want to say thank you. You've done a ton since we last met. I was looking through all that. I'm like, whoa, okay.
So good at that.
And when I say we, I really mean all these folks and then the folks.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess, thank you. So a little bit on the survey. I'll talk about this and again, just kind of see what Chris and Lynn might have to add. This was an online survey. We got 131 responses, so pretty decent number. Not quite as many as I think the previous couple of surveys.
Correct.
But still, I would say pretty good. This was a pretty open-ended survey. We didn't give people really multiple choice questions. We sort of presented information and asked for their opinions. We asked people about kind of 3 scenarios that kind of relate to what's on the ground now versus more intensive development versus sort of more intensive development yet. And so what we heard generally about those 3 scenarios was scenario 1, which is sort of, I'll call it a little bit the medium scenario. It's that one at the top. So it's buildings with a little less height, but still mixed use development. So a mix of housing and commercial or retail development in these focus areas, emphasis on pedestrian friendly development. But we didn't show buildings quite as tall in scenario 1 as we did for scenario 2. So scenario 1, strong support for that mixed use pattern of development, for that focus on creating an environment that's friendly for people who are walking, rolling, et cetera. Scenario 2, similar support, but some concerns over the potential allowed height of buildings in that scenario. I will say kind of mixed comments on that. Existing conditions, pretty low levels of support for that. People who responded to the survey are not really in favor of, we have this type of slope. Is, I would say, overall. And concerns over sort of pedestrian safety associated with the existing condition scenario. So,
Some of the comments that I read is, well, people like the look of maybe scenario one versus the existing conditions. There's always that background concern, but it's going to be more traffic, and that's
yeah, I mean that has sort of been consistent. I think there are concerns about traffic in the area, that there's already traffic and more traffic. And at the same time, and traffic speeds also a concern. Can I get through as fast as I want? And I mean, what I would say is you cannot have all those things. And in fact, slower speeds are going to improve things for pedestrians to some degree. And
well, and hopefully with the connection to the neighborhoods, people from the neighborhoods won't feel the need to drive their car up to.
and reduce certain traffic in certain ways. Yeah, so people can get a lot more of their needs met in certain places.
Yeah, and that's been, Carol, that's been coming up a little bit more and more as we've gotten into sort of these more, this is no longer a theory, this is a thing I can see and touch and feel. And we've been really clear that, yeah, this won't fix any traffic. It's not going to fix it to where you can travel at any time, any day, however you want. It's just never going to happen. So hopefully people understand the best thing we can do is seek out things that we want and how it will look in the future. And hopefully we can work on traffic, as you said, through those connectivity conditions. And remove some things on the road. But we've been very clear, like it won't fix it, but there isn't a fix.
Anyway, related question, is there, I don't know if can we dictate any traffic calming stuff or not?
So that's a broad topic. At the end of the day, we do have some crosswalks. We have 12 of them that are in the draft plan right now, additions to what exists right now. We heard crosswalks was very important through all the events we've done for the project so far. And so Matt and Bell and Matt and Rick and their teams have put together some crosswalks at certain points. We can't dictate anything on ODOT's right of way. It's their space, but we are trying to work with ODOT, and they are on our technical advisory committee. So we'll be getting a little bit more of that at the next TAC meeting, which is next week.
And is it 12 additional?
12 new.
Okay.
12 new. Primarily focused on transit stops and crosses from places that we want to be.
Yeah.
So not in the middle of nowhere.
Take a look at that a little bit.
Yeah, didn't want to jump ahead, but it's a discussion.
I mean, and the other thing I would say is just having more people in the corridor. Yeah. Would typically does calm traffic as well. But in terms of traffic calming, like speed humps or things like that.
About speed.
Yeah.
I was thinking about islands actually.
Yeah, so pedestrian crossings with islands could be a way to help calm traffic. Anything that's kind of
vegetation in there,
Yeah.
like speed in there.
Boulevard.
So we'll talk about all that stuff a little bit more.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
that part of it.
Katrina, you have a question?
Yeah. Just wondering about when folks submitted for the survey, was it a random call? Did you use like a call center?
No,
or was it
this
just
was
on the
just
website?
online, it
Oh,
was on
okay.
the website,
Okay.
and city staff continued to like push out information about this project and about the survey via the website, the interested parties list. Yep.
So we have, our audience who signed up to follow this, and we pushed out a notice to take the survey to them. Then we also did on social media and our weekly,
The newsletter.
weekly newsletter. Yeah.
Yep.
So,
Perfect.
and
Sorry,
it's
I missed
open
it, so I was
for-
like, oh, I felt
it was open for,
Several weeks.
10 weeks, I think.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, that's a
You're
good.
talking about survey 3.
yeah,
Yeah.
survey,
Okay.
yes.
Gotcha.
And I wonder if people say, well, I already did a survey on this, or because it was open so long, they go, did I answer these questions already? And
Yeah.
so I think that may have confused a little bit.
possible, yeah.
maybe Limited some of the responses.
I mean, I will say, these surveys are not statistically valid for an example surveys. None of them have been. Those are very expensive surveys to
Yeah.
conduct. And so we've tried to, frankly, be more surveying. So we get some information in 2 points rather than those are, it's like $20,000 to $40,000 surveys every time.
I was thinking, so that's what I was asking. I was like, so wait, are these the professionals? They're so spending?
I think, yeah, so that's not good.
I think we're reaching more people too from all of the different events.
Yep.
that
Any
we did.
meeting,
So
yeah.
even if people didn't go online and do the survey online, all of that information has been
We're
captured.
getting it, yeah.
And some of it could be duplicative. There could have been somebody that talked to you at a
Certainly,
event
yeah.
and then filled out the same information with the survey.
Yeah.
And it's also why you're here, because you represent your people.
All right.
I was,
Do we have another slide on this survey? I'm just trying to remember one. So I want to make sure we get everybody's questions, but I want to see if there's anything. Okay. I'm going to say a few more things about the survey and then just get any other questions, but I want to at least get the rest of the info out of the survey. So just a few kind of overarching themes that we heard from folks who participated. Again, some concerns that new development would not be consistent with or look like what's in those neighborhoods surrounding those areas. Kind of, we asked people about, the location of parking lots, and people generally opposed to large parking lots in front of buildings sort of directly adjacent to the highway. Again, strong support for pedestrian and bicycle safety features and development of those types of improvements. We talked about this already, concerns over traffic congestion, and we talked about this as well, some mixed opinions on potential increases in maximum allowable height. Good feedback on kind of landscaping and ideas around green infrastructure, and just generally having a future that's more friendly or friendly to the environment, sustainable, and strong support for economic growth and just opportunities for local businesses to be in this corridor, thrive in this corridor. So those are kind of some of the key themes that we heard. So anything to add from?
We did get a couple comments. I heard a theme of, we want it to feel like downtown Atlanta. It's not the same, but they want it to be a better environment to be in. Certain mall, noisy.
They don't want Beaverton.
Well,
Right.
they don't want what we have, so.
Yeah.
Wilsonville. Not downtown.
It
The other
is-
areas.
Is, what makes Willamette so attractive?
It's walkable, the businesses you can pop in on. I think the strong community efforts that, events down there. Yeah.
Safe.
The look,
The
safe.
sign, the look, I
Yeah.
think it's kind of the street through there.
I think, yeah, the street really improved. The street is
Yeah.
a great
It's
addition.
pretty, I think, accessible for folks, and then once they're there, a nice place to walk around. And I've heard this from folks, not just in Westland, but we're doing some planning work for Happy Valley, and we're looking at planning a future downtown. And the street cross section for Willamette is like the one that that's this cross section they're looking at for a future downtown street. People that are also like, wow, that's a great street.
And there's so much down there that you can, and it's not that long. When I go there, I just take the first parking space and I'm fine, because it's not gonna kill me.
Walk around.
Walk 3 or 4 blocks.
That's really nice white sidewalks.
Yeah.
And the active bridge floors, right? Like
Yeah.
there are a lot of services that don't drive foot traffic, but almost all of them are upstairs.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point.
Yeah, so any other questions or thoughts on this survey?
What, as someone who lives in this zone, unless you can get a wide enough sidewalk far enough away from the noise of traffic, I'll never walk. Really.
Yeah.
It's so unpleasant. So I'm wondering, was there any feedback around like noise mitigation?
Yeah. Everybody wants it to be a pleasant place to be, and noise would be one of them.
Yeah.
And a slower speed limit would help that.
Yes.
And trees
Yeah.
streetscaping and.
Green space, the small little strip in between the sidewalk and to have trees to access an object.
That would help. It's so
I take that over in restroom.
Oh, so I have Couple questions. Has anyone proposed, for one example, one of the things on 43 that we've noticed over the last, let's call it month, is the low retention of businesses. Businesses, there's only certain types of businesses that will actually stay along board. We have our attorneys, we have our dentists, but a lot of businesses are in and out. They can't stay, they're not viable. And one of the reasons is, and we faced this in Southeast Portland several years ago, is 43 acts as an arterial flow. It's not something where people are stopping and shopping. 43 is to get from point A to point B. It's not to do errands. It's not to function as a community shopping. Foster, Southeast Foster along 40 in Southeast Portland also fell into that. And even, what was it, in 2003, 2004, it was filled with, most famously, linoleum, plumbing supply, guns, and other taxidermy.
Yeah.
And
So-
but 43 weirdly went the exact opposite direction. It improved. It went the 100% 180 model. It is one of the very few neighborhoods that improved when it started installing strip club, tattoo parlor, marijuana dispensary,
So Matt,
and that's what made it
Do you have kind of a feeling of the have any economic
Yeah, I mean, what's the question?
So in terms of arguing for flow mitigation, when we're talking about slowing traffic, and when we're talking about boulevard modeling or mitigation, has anyone suggested the argument that by slowing and by making these modifications, we could increase people pulling into, and in our design, we will make it so that it will be more local business friendly.
I mean, I think that's the point of all last week.
But is the message being conveyed to the people taking the survey or the community? Hey, look, we can make it so it supports
Yeah, I
local
mean, yes,
businesses.
yes,
I
we
think
have,
we are trying.
we've addressed that multiple times at,
Are they
on,
hearing?
well, I can't.
Message conveyed.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean message.
I
It's hard for us to know for sure. People are hearing. Has to be, if we can hear what we can hear and see what we can see from the survey results and from being out there talking to people, but we know exactly people are kind of getting that message where it's resonating with that beyond what we hear from the survey about it.
And some of the responses to the surveys, it's kind of obvious they're not.
Yeah.
But other responses, it's like, yeah, I get
Some
it.
people are consistently or everyone. Yeah.
So one thing I want to say is we need some things back from you guys. So Matt has some questions to ask you, so he needs to get, we need you to respond to his questions. So I think we're probably pretty much done with the survey, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And we're done with that's summarizing the results. I don't, and we didn't, I mean, we didn't have any questions for the about the survey, it was more just here's information about the survey. But it's good to kind of hear your perspectives on it, think about it. So I'll talk about this a little bit. So again, we went from these kind of more amorphous, I'll say, focus area boundaries that we've been showing you on previous maps to a set of recommended boundaries, which are the blue dashed lines that sort of tracing here. So what this map is showing is the proposed boundaries of a future mixed use zone where the city would allow a combination of commercial development, which the red areas are not currently zoned for commercial use, as well as residential development, as well as a mix, either vertically or horizontally within those areas. So we, in some cases, including this one, we kind of extended the boundary a little further just to capture more properties that might have some potential for future redevelopment. Nobody needs to do anything differently if they don't want to in these areas. This doesn't preclude people doing what they're already doing. It doesn't make it, unlawful to do that. It really just kind of expands their options for what they can do. But we did, again, we wanted to make sure we were following either property lines or roads. Generally, we followed either the property line, kind of a property off of Highway 43. But in some cases, we took the boundary out a little further to capture the area between a given road. So like up there on the top, you got the boundary along Old River Drive and along a Walling Way coming down. So
Well, you
that's-
can also see that one property, I think that's the doctor's office that isn't all zoned commercial.
Yeah.
But it's a commercial property.
right. So I'm going to walk through all of these, and then we're going to ask you questions, and we'll come back to these. Because I want to make sure we kind of recall, and we'll come back, and we can talk back and forth in the presentation. So that's focus area 1. So focus area 2, this was one that was pretty small originally, and that dash circle was the focus area boundary. It's not really an area that's currently has commercial uses. It includes head church that we thought did make sense as a future opportunity, maybe for a partnership with the church and either an affordable housing developer or the city to create some more housing in this area. When we kind of looked at this area a little more closely with that, does that really make sense as an area to apply mixed use zoning, to apply this mix of commercial and housing? And we sort of came to at least the conclusion amongst the team that maybe that doesn't make the most sense. Let's maybe think about this area as an opportunity in the future for multifamily or affordable housing, but not, given its size, focus on mixed use in that area. So we don't think like that smaller focus area is a place where mixed use is, sort of essential to the success of accomplishing the vision for the area. So we can keep this as a focus area, but not really necessarily as a target for that new mixed use zone. So that's kind of what we're thinking about focus area 2. Focus area 3. So this one, this is where the old fire station is, correct? So which the focus area was fairly small in the earlier maps. And we are suggesting expanding this to capture some more of the current kind of the mix of uses around there, a lot of which are currently residential. So this one probably expanded more than maybe some of the other ones, probably just given how small it was to start with.
But again, there's some commercial development in there that's.
It's already there.
Already there.
Residential,
Right,
so
exactly.
Yeah.
Residential.
So that's partly what we were trying to capture with some of that area, but zone for residential, but it is existing. Yeah, and then just kind of make sense logically in terms of going out to the streets in most cases and capturing those. So it's not kind of right in. Well, no, back there.
And that other part of there, that are 4.5, that's that part.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, in terms of the intensity of development consistent with what this mixed use area would allow anyway. So, so that's that one. And then last one. And so this one, you can see pretty good sized commercial area now. We didn't kind of push those boundaries out too far, but we did bump them out a little bit in a couple of places. Again, over on the left, you've got that R4.5. We kind of pulled that into the focus, into the potential mixed use zoning area, and then just kind of grabbed a little more of the properties to the south and also to the north. So I don't know, anything else anybody would add about that proposed boundary?
Well, Matt, the R4.5 to the left of the bottom left of the screen, along 43, those are already operating as commercial properties, and they have been for a long time. Chiropractor and maybe a law office.
Oh, yeah, it's that little
Nail salon.
Yeah, nail salon. Yeah, we've just needed to get that rezoned to be zoned the way it's acting.
Yeah.
So that's an easy fix. That's just a cleanup. But really the sort of more challenging discussion is here up on Amy Street above the gas station. These are ODOT properties that are sort of used as staging. So this is, one of the questions. And then the other really is what we're trying to do here in residential spaces behind the OBC zone was properties that would be accessed through the commercial development, not properties accessed through the neighborhood. That's kind of how we delineated between those. So these properties already you have to go Garden Street past Market of Choice and Key Bank to get to them. So they seemed like they might work as part of that center. So just so you know, that's how we kind of came to that conclusion.
Yeah, allows for maybe a more cohesive
Cohesive.
future development.
Correct.
Yeah, and a little bit larger.
Yeah.
So, which might make it more financially feasible, particularly in some of those places. So, yeah, so that's kind of where we are in terms of, again, identifying these boundaries. I think really good point on, these places where we've got commercial uses already, applying this mixed use zone kind of says, oh yeah, that's what would be allowed already. With these things that are on the ground would be allowed in that mixed use zone, even though they're not. What the 4.0 or 4.5. So we'll go to the next slide because we've got some questions for you, and then we'll bump back because I know there were hands raised on the earlier slides. But kind of the questions for you all are, what do you think? Do you agree with those initial boundaries? Or are there areas that you think where we ought to make some changes, remove or add to those boundaries? And do you agree with our approach on that focus area too, instead of recommending that as a mixed use area, not recommend mixed use zoning, think about it as opportunities for housing? So
Can I clarify something before I answer that
absolutely.
question? So where you drew those boundaries that are currently so let's just say residential, what zoning like heights to apply? Is that what now we're talking about? We're talking about in general, and then the zoning will decide, oh, you can only have a 2-story there versus a. Is that correct?
That'll be part of the next agenda item.
Okay. Okay.
But generally, what would be allowed in those areas would be, again, a mix of different types of development, commercial, residential, and residential would include potentially multifamily, so apartments or condominiums, that kind of thing. The heights would be somewhere between 45 and 55. There could be some requirements in terms of transitioning from particularly anybody that's sort of directly next to a lower density residential zone. There could be some requirements around height transitions along the edge of the zone. So that would be another thing we could look at. So we'll talk more about some of that when we get to the next agenda.
Okay.
But generally, that's what we're talking about. There would be, again, the other type of development standards in place would be parking needs to be on the side or in the rear. You could have a higher percentage of the lot covered by a building. You're already in this area for the most part, have reduced or eliminated the left parking, off-street parking requirements. So, sort of a variety of things.
I just want to make sure what we could sort of dictate where those properties are in the neighborhood. So
but you wouldn't,
because that changes how I answer the question.
and those would be maximum allowed heights, for instance. It's not like a minimum required height. And I don't think we're proposing, like a floor area ratio standard. So if you have like a minimum floor area ratio means the amount of floor area divided by the area of the site. The floor area of a building divided by the area of the site. And some cities will use that standard to really ensure that you get for height. We're not proposing that at this time. So we'll talk more about that today, but does that help?
Yeah, that's fine.
The other point that really needs to be emphasized is that even if you owned one of these properties and it was rezoned tomorrow, literally you don't have to change a thing. It's in the future, if you choose, you have more options to do so on your property. If it's a single family home, next 300 years, you could live in a single family home.
And I guess the concern is you don't do anything, but your neighbor wants to.
But your neighbor's already.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
So does that potentially reduce property values when you go from strictly residential to mixed use?
So I'd say it would actually increase your value.
Typically increases your property.
Really?
And especially if you're allowing more intensive residential development than is what is currently allowed. So,
No, if you own the property, it increases, but if
Yeah.
you're across the street, does it decrease? I think what you're asking.
Right. Well, it typically does not, because it typically gives people more access to those types of services, which is beneficial for folks. So I would say on average, it does not typically decrease. I live, for instance, in Southeast Portland, where my property values continue to go up, in part because of all of this type of development that has happened along the main street that's a block from my house.
It increases your walk to school. It's not traditional, it's very low.
Yeah, that too. But I would say generally, in most cases, it does not actually produce more apt to increase, both for the properties within and the properties nearby. it's sort of like, it's like parks also reach property values.
Schools, parks, yeah.
So one of the things, I lived near Bridgeport Village before it was Bridgeport Village. And I can say there was a lot of opposition to Bridgeport Village. But as soon as that was built and everybody in my neighborhood could walk to Bridgeport Village, our property taxes went up. Not tax, not, I mean.
Wrong message.
Put that right here.
And it became a very desirable place to live because it was a walkable, very walkable.
So I recently read an article by a, urban planner kind of person, and it was, if you build it, they won't care. And but what was the premise of this article was the Lake Oswego Millennial Park area. Because, and they even talked in this article that somebody evidently went to city council when they were first talking about this in the 80s and played a song on their guitar to sing to the council saying why they shouldn't do it. And there was a lot of opposition to this plan, and the plan didn't come to fruition for a long time, but now nobody can remember what it used to look like, and everybody thinks it's lovely.
Are you saying folk rock venues?
Folk rock failures.
Yeah.
Well, it depends on
Yeah.
what you consider failure.
I was wondering, on the question of should we expand or attract some on focus area 4. So I actually live right up on Broadway, so I'm very close to Amy. And I see the little red mark you see right on Amy Street there. You see the red mark on that far left-hand side, up just a little bit. So the one right across the street from that is also a dentist office.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
then, is it commercial already?
No, it's actually a residentially zoned property.
Okay, so I didn't know if we needed to.
We might as well add it.
You're talking about this one, right?
Yeah. and
Yeah.
Is it one, or I can't remember if it's one or two places, but they're kind of dotted in there. So I'm
Yeah.
always like, oh, maybe my whole street is, near me. So I just really needed to add that, or if that's like doing that little 3 block, right, but until Buse. I'm not sure, I'm just pulling that.
Yeah.
Well,
Like
it's a
right
good
here.
point, Shatrine, since this is operating as a
Yeah.
commercial business and it's a dentist's office, if I
Yep.
recall,
Yes, it is.
it would make sense to just include it to capture it for what it's acting as.
And that might be sort of, if y'all thought that made sense, and that's a lot of what or part of what we've been doing to any existing commercial use. Include it.
Yeah.
If it's
Yeah.
right next to something we've already included within the boundary, if y'all think, oh, that would make sense, then that's sort of, we could take another, we've done it to some degree already, but we could take another look.
It's just,
Expand and target
Yeah.
ways.
Yeah.
I include the neighbors as well, right? Just
I think that 3
all
blocks, yeah.
3 right there.
Because that would allow somebody to really,
Yeah.
if they decided to change things, really do something cool.
So
And-
bump it out here like.
And so just so you
Yeah.
know, we walk there, but all of the high school students do too.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah.
the massive, when you're
Oh,
going
yeah.
out and I go to
Big
leave at
market.
11:30,
Yeah.
everybody's coming out. So it's also a very good opportunity if somebody decides to build there later, besides the dentist, they are awesome. But if they move from there, it's a very good location too. So just the
Yeah.
thought,
So generally,
that's what my thought was.
makes sense.
Okay, thank you. Good feedback.
Any other comments on this area? Anybody online have comments on focus area 4?
I'm good.
I'll say.
On the west edge of the bottom, and on the tax lot line, but why are we going along the road there? 'Cause there would be more potential further north, further left.
Further left.
All the way to the
Keep
left.
going right there.
Oh,
Why wouldn't we use the street there to unlock?
You mean Highway 43?
No.
Yeah, first, why not first instead of the middle of the tax lot?
It's not, those are multiple properties.
yeah, this is the property line that it's on.
We're following the property.
And I think their question is like.
Why wouldn't we use the street? Because then if you wanted to buy both properties and develop, there's.
Yeah.
You could. I mean, I think at some point we're looking at being careful not to look like we're grabbing a bunch of stuff.
Right, the reason why we took this was it actually had frontage on
Front's 43.
43.
Yeah.
But you're right, it is,
If I want to do something cool, I probably want to buy 3 tax lots. Do I have to buy them all on 43 frontage, or could I use some of the map?
Yeah.
Then I'm
So
gonna
you-
have bought 3 tax lots and have to, I don't know, do something to get the time change.
Yeah, this is a problem they run in North Portland along Tualatin, Helen.
Yeah.
Thing you're describing. A lot of businesses.
And again, nobody has to change the current use, so maybe just move it to first quarter.
I mean, what you're saying is like, could you actually do anything with what it is now in that
Well,
picture?
sure.
If you can't.
I just get something long.
But I can't build a
Can't
building
really-
that's any
Yeah.
different footprint than what's already there.
So I think you're hearing a question of viability or feasibility. Can we move at least that section to first quarter, at least for that block?
Yeah, I did.
Sure.
Yeah. if you
So,
don't-
so, yeah, and so just to be clear, so the process is, we talk about this here. Counselor Bright and Lynn and myself and MIG, we sat down and created these sort of newer boundaries, right? First step is coming to you guys for feedback. We can make adjustments based on your feedback, but at some point we'll work session this with our planning commission. And then they will need to recommend it to council, and then we will work session it with our city council and they will approve it. So what we say and do and change today may not end up being this way, but we're certainly willing to take your feedback and make adjustments and see how it goes through that process, right? So happy to do that.
Well, I think that's better anyway, so thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Who wants us to make it?
Yeah, I mean, the goal of this group is a community working group, right? People within the community, whether business or residential, giving us feedback on the things that we're working on. So yeah, I mean, that's the point.
I think I'm generally hearing most folks here think, yeah, that's a good idea.
And to Christian's point, if it was all the way to first court, you could have access from
Yeah.
first court, and you wouldn't have.
Right, you get it off 43, yeah,
Well,
that makes sense.
Just to play the devil's advocate there, that would bring the only commercial development on First Court would be here. You know, so, I mean, that would be a commercial access where the rest is residential in it. I mean, yeah, this is a great loop here.
So it begs the question, do you run it all the way down to this
Yeah.
garden? Do
Yeah.
you run it to here?
So then this is a whole commercial.
Do you see what we're asking?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then this is up to the,
Oh, yeah,
up to the
then-
high school here. So just remember the high school right here.
Yeah.
But we also, you know,
But yeah, I mean, thoughts on continuing that boundary past.
When you think about what you could build there, like you have this kind of like nice little downtown area by Hood Street across the street. And if you had that much larger area, then it would be a smaller version of that, right? So it might actually be a better.
So I think some early feedback from Counselor Reich was a discussion we had about the Walling Circle and Old River, and just if we make spaces where people could, to, I think it was Christine's point, Counselor Lewis's point, could actually do something cool, then you might get something cool there. But if we just have little one-off properties, then we're going to limit what we can or can't do. So
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm on board with trying it and see what feedback we get. You know, we'll also probably put some of this out in some NA meetings and random open houses and stuff to gather more feedback. So,
And I would say, like, generally, with me, or if I'm thinking about, like, start a little bigger, and it's easier to scale back.
Contraction's
and
easier.
It's easier to contract later if you
Yep.
get.
Dream big.
right,
Yeah.
right.
I agree.
It's a good way of thinking of it.
so then this whole,
Yeah, so we're capturing this.
Oh,
Oh,
sorry.
that's me. It's a touch screen. That was on me.
Really? You just did that?
Yeah, these are touch screens.
Wow, you really placed it all on there.
yeah.
So yeah, so you're talking about all of this first court. Okay, okay.
But then,
And then the dentist office.
And this one.
And
So
then
it's
that-
gonna come down
Those
here
three,
and then go across.
those three.
Yeah.
You want these three right here
So,
to Buse?
That's what I.
Okay, okay.
and what about that little wedge that reflects where the current like law office is and stuff like that on the left? Yeah, so wedge right to the left of that. Yeah, that whole thing.
Oh, the.
Yeah, like this whole thing right here,
Oh,
because that's like an opposite to this commercial. So anyway, just thinking about.
Yeah, we discussed that.
Okay.
Yeah, we did discuss that and,
Okay,
we didn't want to get greedy.
okay.
yeah.
No, we didn't want
Just-
to look like.
That's good.
Ask, yes, Mary. You look concerned.
Well, just forgive my ignorance.
No.
If I were living there, I'd love to get a letter in the mail saying, we are going,
Oh, and
we're proposing.
people will, for
Yeah.
sure.
So there will be an opportunity for neighbors who
Yeah.
are directly affected by this change.
Yeah, I know what the city's, licensing requirements are, but this would be a proposed zone change.
Yep.
And typical notice for a proposed zone change is gonna be the properties and then a distance out,
Right.
250
Yeah.
feet or.
For a zone change, it's further than that. It might be 500,
500.
plus you have the DLCD 30-day.
So there's a.
But we're gonna be shocked.
But even better.
We're shopping this out with open houses. I mean, this is like, we're setting up to give that information to people in the summer open house season, so.
But that may not be a letter directly.
No, that's
Right.
not.
Yeah,
no,
I
it
think so.
will-
Distinguishing.
In addition.
Yeah, but in addition to, so yes, at some point there will be a letter
Yes.
to people that live
Within a certain
this certain
distance.
distance of this boundary.
Yep, it's
And
legally
then
required.
before that, there will be more informal, hey, we'd like to hear your thoughts about this. And this is how it looks.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a fair concern. I think for some, it's, you live across the street from a commercial district. There's some expectation it's not residential. That doesn't mean your property necessarily has to change, but but if we're really going way off the beaten path, that's certainly gonna cause some concern for people, so.
Yeah. Got it. Thank you. All right. Mary, speak
your
again
mind.
on this one.
Pardon me?
We want to hear what you have to say. That's why we're here.
It's just, I live really close to Burgerville. I don't live across the street from Burgerville for a reason.
Right.
I don't want to be looking at Burgerville. I don't want to be looking at the car wash lights.
But how would you feel about, like, next to, like Bridgeport Village or a downtown, like?
Yeah, that's not Burgerville.
No,
We're trying to not have more Burgervilles.
yeah, that's the.
No, I-
That's, because right now, that's what we're gonna get is more car washes in Burgerville.
And the mixed use isn't gonna make that any,
No.
so that's the whole thing.
Right,
We'll avoid that.
Yeah, that's the goal is,
Yeah.
as we've been saying, if we don't change what we have, we won't get anything different than what we have. So that's kind of what we're trying to get at. So we want to hear that.
So I do have one comment on the first focus area.
Okay, can you back up to what was that?
We're good on this one. Yeah. All right, yeah.
This one here.
So I was, and I think we had this conversation, there is the Robinwood Station is off of Cedar Oak.
Split right here.
And so it's arctic with the conditional use, and then there's those two houses that are there on the corner of
Yep.
Cedar Oak and Oak River. Well, I guess one of them is Kenmore, but I was just wondering if we wanted to go ahead and include.
That's right.
Those three.
Go up there, so those two properties and then the Robinwood Station. Yeah,
Those three properties.
and again, nobody has to do anything, but that little
But-
corner, that one right there that the arrow is on, now that could be a nice little workspace with living above, or, a cafe or something, and it could also connect a little bit with the uses at the Robinwood Station.
Yeah.
Catering kitchen.
And what we're talking about is we want to make sure they have enough land to do something,
Yeah,
Well, going back to that theme, we can always kind of go bigger and contract as we move through the process.
That generally makes sense to folks to grab those three.
yeah.
I mean, Robinwood Station is a city property.
This one.
Yeah,
Makes sense.
and that's not going anywhere anytime soon. We just spent a fair amount of money on that one.
No,
What
that's
street
a
is
value
this?
asset.
That's shaded.
No, that's,
So I'm
I mean,
trying to figure out where Burgerville is.
Just past that.
And there are some places where, further away, there's some additional commercial development, but we did not want to necessarily grab all intervening residential. We were, that's why we kind of
Yeah.
use that term focus areas, so as not to sort of be
Yeah.
so large that, they kind of fill opportunities.
so
But good question.
I think that is Shady Hollow and that's Burgerville
Mm.
right there, the pink, yeah. that's
So the
pink.
next one after Walling, it's Fairview Way.
This is Fairview, but then up.
And then Shady Hollow.
And then,
We're heading north to Lake Oswego.
yeah, Shady Hollow, right, yes.
So this is,
That's probably Shady Hollow.
Yeah, so that pink area right there, the end of the commercials on that's Burgerville.
That's Burgerville right there. That's their drive. You see that drive through.
That is, it's in the area.
And there is a very weird property right next to Burgerville.
Mhm.
It's private property that was sold, has been sitting vacant for like 3 years. And I believe these are the condominiums.
They are.
Yes. Directly across,
Yeah.
and all the neighbors, we keep expecting this to turn to condos.
It's R10, so it can't.
Yeah.
Yeah. But are you suggesting to add this property then?
Well, I mean, it is, it's been sitting
Makes
vacant for
sense.
3 years.
It is a large piece of property.
Yeah.
Get something.
An acre.
Yeah, it's a big property.
And it
Yeah.
probably,
Okay.
so potentially.
And considering the commercial use right next door to it.
Yeah, that would make
And
that,
the condos across the street.
that would make sense for that.
Yeah.
What do you guys think?
And then my house is right here, so my property values, I mean, right there.
It should go, I mean, should go up for people wanting to go and being able to walk to places, you know what I mean? So.
Yeah.
Okay. So a couple of adjustments in this area.
Yeah.
Any other comments on focus area one?
Because I go through.
Okay.
probably-
And what about, oh, did we have any comments on
Yeah.
taking the church out?
I have questions.
Oh, on which area?
So, yeah,
Focus area.
two. So the first thing, with the way that the question is phrased, my first question is when it's saying, are you okay with moving it? And I heard your comments. So when removing the mixed use, and just the question is, so why, or what were the reasons that you were saying like, okay, we want to get rid of the mixed use requirement? Just tease that out.
Yeah, and again, I guess I think about it a couple ways. One is those other areas we thought made more sense to apply a mixed use zoning doesn't. If there are already existing commercial areas or mixtures of commercial and residential. This is really kind of not. It's an existing church surrounded by for the most part, lower density residential
And it's
uses.
really close to.
Focus area.
Focus area.
Close to another focus area. And it's relatively small, and other than the church, there's not a lot there in terms of development potential. But we do think it could be an opportunity for some more intensive housing in the church with somebody, but
It doesn't need
may
its
not-
own change.
It doesn't need to have its own change.
Is it R10?
We just didn't
Yeah,
think
they're
it made a lot of sense to add that kind of mixed use.
To go through the extra work or something that you don't feel is going to have a
It's
sufficient.
it's super viable, right? Yeah, so that was our thing.
So if it's R10 though, I mean, as doing zone changes, could we consider making it a higher density zoning?
But
Or five.
my understanding is that there's some state legislation that says that to allow churches to provide low-income housing.
Yeah, I don't know.
But that doesn't mean.
There are. and it's-
So it might not have to change.
Zoning.
Oh, that legislation doesn't overrule your zoning.
Right.
Oh, okay.
So-
It's
so-
about the parcel land. Oh,
So it might, to allow for, again, if we target this for mixed use, or if we target this for, or think about this more as an opportunity for multifamily or affordable housing, it might require a zone change to a more intensive residential designation.
But it doesn't have to be.
Although we could build townhomes in here right now at whatever density is allowed for townhomes. It's actually a fairly high density
yeah.
without changing the zone. Because middle housing is allowed throughout the city, including townhomes.
Yep. And townhouse projects, the average property size has to be 1,500 square feet. So on a big property like that, you could put a whole.
And same with complexes, you could have a mix of like any kind of middle housing site without a zone change.
So the point being is we don't need to really fix a problem that doesn't technically exist through this process. And it keeps it cleaner to just 3 focus areas that are already being developed as commercial for the most part. Now we just want to make it better, you know? So that's kind of what, that was our thinking around like, this just probably isn't the appropriate avenue for this.
Got it?
Yeah.
All the answers work, but now I just want to ask a theory question. If you had put in mixed use in there, because it was on church land, could the church have invoked, there are certain things where they're allowed to use exclusions that other organizations aren't allowed to use? Is that something that would have applied? I'm just,
I don't know.
this is the theory.
I don't know.
And if so, that kind of boisters me even further for kind of my wisdom. But it was just kind of theory world of like greater understanding.
Well, again, I think one of the points was that there is state legislation that allows churches to do certain types of development. They still have to be consistent with the zoning.
Mhm.
And so if we were to apply a mixed use designation that allowed for multifamily housing, for instance, that would the ability to do that kind of development, whether they wanted to do any commercial as part of that or not.
No, that's,
But if we had some requirements that ground floor, there was a certain amount of, for instance, ground floor commercial required along the front, that might say they couldn't do it. So I think would be a potential for a double-edged sword.
Mhm.
And I would sort of go back to what Chris said is this one just didn't seem like the most appropriate mixed use zone. I don't know if it really super sure to give it that mixed use.
So let me add a comment. I do go to that church on vacation. I also go to the church next to it on vacation. Those two churches are in agreement that we don't want you taking our land. They have shared worship services. And so there's this whole history with the Presbyterian church pushing back on, they were trying to run a straight through the backside of their property, and it was like a whole big deal. I just imagine that, I'm not going to mention this to anybody at West Lutheran Church, but I imagine you're going to get similar kinds of responses. And so just knowing that there's some history behind pretty recent public pushback on the church right next door, the Presbyterian church.
Good to know.
Yeah. But in this case, we're not trying to take anyone's land, but I get the point.
Yeah.
Also, at one time, they really wanted us to.
You put a
buy that.
blue circle around it, so
I was on the planning commission when we approved that.
no one posts that circle.
Well, we already
They wanted it. We were gonna pay it.
But at this point, we're sort
The
of.
Lutheran. Or the Presbyterian.
It totally changed.
Yes.
And that's fine.
Big X across that page.
All right.
Did you have any comments on this area?
So yeah, old Bolton Firehouse here. This is the Russell Williams, State Farm. And he's, correct me if I'm wrong, he's on EPC with me, supportive of some change. And Molly Makem, who's on this committee, not here today, her real estate office is just off the tip of that red triangle. I believe she's also had the desire for her property to be changed to a different zone. Although I think her house might be historic, but let's not get into that. So the concept generally that we were working on here is creating kind of, as Councilor Reich has discussed previously with us, enough space to create something, a district or places for people to go, not just one stop, So if we allow in the future some of these properties to develop, this is actually a lot like Main Street. Not many people know, but Main Street just to the north is 8th. 8th is mixed use. It's all single family homes right now, but it's actually been rezoned so that people can utilize it as mixed use in the future. So this is kind of that same concept of, as things turn over in the future, maybe there's other uses that people would like. So that was kind of our concept here.
And kind of the cool thing here is that the smaller end of the triangle commercial is owned by the city.
Correct.
Owned by the city.
Yeah, we own this property right here, and we are hoping to move through a process at some point in the future on a public-private partnership to develop something that would be really, dare I say, cool and awesome.
We also own this, and this could be a, like a
Right.
pocket park and stuff of it too. It could be quite an attractive little place.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you think? Any questions?
You got thoughts on this one? So here, there's a little bit more residential, being added in. Apartments up here, we included all of those properties because they're all actually owned by the same ownership group. And so it didn't make sense to leave one or two of their properties out. They're all part of an LLC that is the apartment complex itself.
And you didn't include those properties that are on A Street behind the red zone.
No, left those as residential.
Yeah.
Is that just weird? Are they up too? Are they elevated above 40?
Little
Yeah,
bit, yeah, they start to kind of come up, it starts to rise up a little bit.
I just think again about like having stuff on each side, how
Yeah.
that helps it to
Yep.
feel a little more cohesive.
Yep.
But
As long as
just,
you got a way to get across.
Yeah, as long as you got a way to get across.
Yeah.
There is a light.
Yeah, there is a limited age.
It's down, it would be down here,
Oh.
or off screen.
They changed the zone.
Yeah, you did.
But you're saying it doesn't make sense to add those because
Want to access.
you just don't want to take too much essentially.
Well, I mean, I don't know. We want to make sure people don't think this is some crazed project, but I mean, we're open, that's why we're here though, is to
Like,
discuss
but it
it.
makes it feel more like, oh, this makes sense versus we're cutting off an important.
Well, there was something, we talked about this property and I don't.
Some of those houses right there are brand new development. They were in.
Yeah, they've been
development.
overhauled, they've been
Well,
renovated.
they're new.
Yeah.
They-
So then we also have some undeveloped properties here that kind of have an access and sewage line problems. That's why they're still sitting there vacant, because they can't get what they need utility wise. So yeah, I mean, there's some weird stuff going on in there. I mean, certainly if you looked forward many like decades, you'd think, oh, West A could be a cool little main street of its own right off the high school, you know, leading to like, that could be cool. You know,
That's where we put the salt and straw, right?
right. Well, you gotta put coffee and sugar in high school, right? Oh, someone said the.
I did.
Oh.
Sorry. Right by the high school, you know.
Wow.
Can I ask, over the years, the Bolton Old Fire Hall, there have been numerous plans of multiple parties all claiming what they're gonna do. At this point, is it plan free?
It is. The firehouse has had a few different offers in the last 6 years or so. Part of it right now is essentially not fit for human habitation. The roof is starting to fail. It is storage for our parks equipment. And it really has not a lot of value unless you want to come in and spend a whole ton of money to overhaul it.
Yeah, pretty sure it's unreinforced.
Yeah.
Unreinforced concrete.
What's that?
I think it's unreinforced concrete.
Yeah, and the other thing about it is in the Highway 43 concept plan, our 2016 concept plan, the highway will actually bump a little bit closer to the firehouse, which was going to make access to the parking behind it unusable.
Yeah.
So it's a single lane that goes back.
Are you getting rid of that little alleyway?
Well, part of it
The
will,
access?
part of it will go to ODOT.
Okay.
Yeah. So some of the larger conversations are closing the ingress of Failing Street. It is only ingress for those traveling north on Highway 43.
Mhm.
Closing that, turning it over to the adjacent properties, potentially, looking at that anyway. And now that we don't have any parking requirements, you could actually, so the long story short is there's very few parking spaces, but call me, I'm sorry.
It's like you have fun.
Well, I know. No, the thing is, I'll touch it with my finger. They'll be all greasy. There's not a lot of parking back there, and there's a very difficult access way. And so the problem is most businesses could not meet minimum parking requirements with what was on site now. Now, as of December 16th, 2024, we do not have minimum parking requirements here. So it does open up the potential uses. However, the highway is going to move a little bit closer to the building, making that access way unusable. And the building's falling down.
The highway's up here and the building is
Correct.
here.
There's about a 12-foot gap in elevation. So essentially, that's a clear it, start over. Pretty much. I mean,
Well, because you can't, there's no access to that.
So
Correct.
I'm gonna kind of move this along.
Sorry.
Because we got a couple big items left.
Oh, yeah.
on our agenda. But before we do that, let's go back there just for a minute. Any suggested changes to the boundary here? Great discussion about it. I guess the only thing I heard that was maybe a potential change would be to add those properties that are at the lower corner there. So I don't know.
I mean, would you stick to the R4.5, that darker yellow color? Like, what are you, we're open to suggestions. That's why we're here, so.
I don't know what that means.
Well, you
Like-
basically would re-include the properties you talked about.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
They're currently.
I mean, we're talking 20 years, so I don't see why not.
It would make it more
Is it-
contiguous.
It would be great. I mean,
Yeah,
it
I love that
would
word.
be very nice. to look
Okay.
at.
Yeah.
So
Let's
I'm
go
gonna-
for it.
Okay.
Sounds like
Yeah.
that change. Okay, cool. All right. Excellent. Thank you. So Brandon is going to kind of cover the next bit here. So we're going to get to your question earlier and say a little bit more about what does this mean? You know, when we talk about applying a mixed use zoning designation. what looks different? What can people do differently now compared or in the future compared to? So that's what we're gonna start to talk about.
Yeah. I'll give Matt a break from talking here, although I'm sure you'll still be pointing in as we go through. But yeah, we have the work group discussion questions kind of peppered throughout these slides. We won't be having to toggle back and forth as much, but now we're, as Matt said, really kind of getting into the development and design concepts. So what we've initially come up with has really been informed by the vision and goals that we put together and everything we've heard from the surveys and community input and events, and also the concept visualizations that we've already talked about earlier. So this is kind of articulating a lot of that. So to start with, some of the initial allowed uses that we're proposing include this list here, and these are all uses that the city already defines in the development code. So now it's just taking those uses and allowing them in this mixed use zone. Kind of the two primary ones I would say that we really want to allow is obviously mixed use development, and that's really just residential above or in combination with commercial, and then also multifamily and some of the other commercial uses like general retail, hotel, motel. So yeah, I think we just open it up here, and do folks generally agree with this list of allowed uses? Any that should be added, any that should be removed?
So I do think if, to clarify that my understanding is that someone could build, here's just a hotel. It doesn't have any residential stuff in it. It's just a hotel. So that's what in my mind, I was like, oh wait, I didn't think we could do that in this zone. So that's kind of a new thing.
Yes, and I'm fairly sure that's already allowed in the commercial zone. Yeah, the hotel, or is it not?
I believe you can, but our problem ends up in lot coverage. They're not big enough for anyone to do.
In these areas that are already zoned for commercial, which is a pretty good chunk of most of them, you know, you kind of saw the earlier maps, I think areas that are already zoned, general commercial. You can already do that. Those uses are allowed, but what Chris is saying is that the other standards that are applied in this zone, the height limitations, the lot coverage limitations, parking, now, have precluded those kind of uses from being developed. Okay. But it's just the general answer is yes, those things would be allowed in this area, in each of those areas that we.
So you can end up living across the street from a hotel.
Potentially could.
Okay. You could front that street. Like we can't dictate like, oh, you can't put a hotel on this side street. It's like,
right.
Typically, no. I mean, you could apply sort of some different, and would apply some different standards to the character, the sort of scale and mass and distance between the road and the development along a street versus on an interior part of the lot. You wouldn't usually distinguish between the uses.
okay, yeah. Well, that seems like that would be the important piece in terms of residential buy-in. Is what you're talking about right there, like how you could affect this setbacks or whatever.
I'd like to add explicitly childcare as a use. It's already along there, but let's be explicit about it. It's a community use. And then one I would like to be, I don't know if we have any or not, but I would like to be explicit, not to include storage facilities.
Yeah, that's going the wrong direction.
Yes.
What we're trying to accomplish.
Yes.
It's the wrong way.
We bought a
Holy
storage
cow.
facility on Highway 43 already.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Yeah, let's be explicit at the planning stage.
So I don't see offices, you know, we have law offices, insurance offices, or I also don't see things like labs, you know, like
Medical labs.
medical labs or.
Blood labs.
Or like you're thinking like offices, like doctors' offices and stuff
Well,
like that
no,
too?
like lawyers' office, any office, but lawyers, insurance people, we already have there. And
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
not a retail use.
I think some of that would be captured under the umbrella of commercial.
Okay.
So that'd be kind of allowed still in mixed use buildings. So
In those notes in that.
Also, personal services, some of those types of risks, 100%.
So these are
Not
pretty
your
broad
office.
categories, and in the memo, we kind of spell out what examples of
Right.
what these categories represent.
It's something to keep an eye on though as we move through this, because we do have the OBC zone for business center, and you don't want people to say, well, that's where offices. It's a good note to make, just then keep an eye on that as we go through it.
Is food carts, delivery carts, specific carve out? Again, if this is arterial, that's where food carts thrive.
Oh, yeah.
Because that forces people to stop. Like the food carts we have in West Lynn, that's niche, that's pretty much for West Lynn. But if you go arterial, that gets people who don't live here to stop.
Yeah, you'd fall, right now that would fall under sort of the eating and drinking establishments, but it's funny because those
I
are,
didn't know if it.
those are a combination because you have these, the trailers are actually managed by DMV and the state of Oregon. So it's a weird space and code on how you get food carts into a city. But yeah, I've actually I've been waiting for something to open up for you. Like I'm waiting for someone to call and say, oh,
And I have somebody that's interested, so I'll connect. up.
Great.
I was gonna say, wait.
Yeah,
just
it does
go.
seem like.
And in some of the early open houses,
Yes.
we have a lot of
That's right.
people saying, you know, uses, do you want to see your house? Many people that are-
The offices that get information, you know?
Yeah.
It's sort of to start to corporate order.
That's great.
Necessary.
Well, actually, I have to have to leave.
Yeah.
So let's talk, but I promise, yes.
Do you define passive oriented parks, or is that the definition? Public plazas and gathering spaces?
That's
That's,
Those are just examples. Of
well, so
No,
that's sort of distinguished from a rec center. You know,
or even tennis
a
courts.
playing field or tennis courts.
Yeah.
Yeah, so passive is more places to walk and hang out. And active is places to
Maybe
like
benches
or
and-
actively recreate, support sports, recreation centers, things like that.
So no skate parks.
You know,
It's a good question.
I think you could put it like an indoor pickleball facility.
Would that go under amusement enterprise?
Like, I was like, you could have a climbing facility with, you know what I mean, like somebody could come in,
I've been
something like
thinking
that.
that rock
But they-
climbing.
Here we're thinking more about outdoor spaces.
Yes.
Outdoor spaces would
Yes.
be more, recreation.
Community recreation, I guess, is like what you're talking about, like an
That's-
indoor climbing gym or
Yes.
or
Yeah, and that could be.
Sort of outdoor, passive, indoor.
Okay. Lynn, you sparked the thought for me about the hospitals. Do we need to say anything like a smaller version? I just was in Woodburn with my uncle and I saw they were doing some small hospital facilities. So do we need to say yay or nay in this? That's just a
We're
random.
talking about like urgent care kind of stuff?
Yeah, and they're big, but in small areas. It's wide.
like a Zoom care.
like I just
Yes.
found out.
Like
Well,
a
look at like
Mine
Providence.
have to-
Yeah, like and how they're doing like
Oh,
almost their neighborhood ones.
I see.
Yeah, like a neighborhood style.
Well, do you
So I
need
don't
it?
know. I'm just throwing that out.
And there's none.
So there's one by Bridgeport Village in
Yeah,
Providence,
I think they're fake.
I think it's 5 stories.
Right.
And it would, it would pick up a lot.
It's huge.
So that's the question.
So
I don't-
medical services
Yeah,
or
so I
something.
don't know if we need to include that or if we have, a limit, whatever. So
Yeah, you don't want a giant medical facility. It
Right.
just ruins the whole idea.
But if it's in like their neighborhoods.
Right.
Do medical,
Neighborhood medical.
They- I really-
actually, I'm gonna counter on that. We have an aging in place population
Fair
who
point.
needs medical services.
No, I support that. I'm talking
Yeah.
about
Oh, yeah.
really large ones.
If they did a neighborhood style, like the little Zoom
Yeah.
cares, that would be pretty cool. And they have one in Oregon, Oregon City has the one way up.
I mean,
They've got
Yeah,
one
you-
next to the market of expensive.
So we're gonna get to some more on sort of
Sorry.
development
Okay.
requirements, and some of those get to size, but one thought would be to put some size limitations on those types of facilities. We allow.
I still think, because 43, again, we are so desperate to get anyone in there to stay, I'm still gonna suggest within limited context, throw it back on the table, limited dispensaries. The medical marijuana dispensaries. People in Westland are doing it, they're growing it here, they're just going to Oregon City. They're going just outside, they're still consuming it.
Yeah, that'll be up to council.
We certainly have a.
Yeah, that'll be a separate.
I'm just saying,
If that's something you've already talked about, but
it's income that's going somewhere else.
So Matt, I had a question, and I would like this group to talk more about what what we're talking about with small scale manufacturing maker spaces. Now, I know everyone loves the idea of maker spaces, but that's actually, that's hard to make a maker space. What, and we're not talking exclusively maker spaces, so I just want a little conversation about that kind of space.
But not too much conversation.
Yeah.
We need to get some more clout. But yeah, any reactions to that? I mean, we're talking about, again, sort of small scale production facility.
Like a label business.
Could be a little business, could be
Something like that.
But so
ceramics.
commissary.
Absolutely. In fact, it should be encouraged. That screams local. That
Yeah.
gets
Everett
people
Street Lots.
excited.
I think it's Everett Street Lots on the North Park Lots in Portland where people have they had studios and, art production. I had a friend who built some small furniture and display stuff there. And then it was a loft and they lived upstairs.
That's right.
Yeah, so generally, yes.
If all the businesses lying there are the same ones that we read in the suburb, there is no reason to stop. There's nothing that gives them a reason to stop. We need to provide unique, one-of-a-kind opportunities that motivates others to stop. That's what I hate. So yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Thumbs up across.
All right, continue.
All right, so generally the answer is yes.
Nice.
All right.
Well done. I'm giving you government.
Suggestion, go into the next slide.
Yeah, so kind of building upon that, for mixed use specifically, we have some options in terms of how much retail and commercial should be required in a mixed use building or mixed use zone. So one option is just to not require ground floor retail or commercial at all. Another option is to, kind of on the opposite end is to fully require it. So the full ground floor would be required to be commercial, which, as you can see, we noted we do not recommend because that just leads to wasted space oftentimes and just vacant.
So that doesn't look good
Yeah.
at all. I like the idea of corner retail and then the rest of it could be residential or whatever.
Right, so there's a few options. You can give the developer more flexibility, say, minimum percentage, 50%, whatever it is, has to be ground floor retail or require it just along specific frontages where you want to see that ground floor retail. An example we provided here is how City of Vancouver has provided it in their mixed use zone. They kind of highlight where they're requiring ground floor retail and active store frontages.
And I think even in those areas, it's along those frontages, it's a minimum percent is required. And it can be, or they allow for an active use that's not a commercial use. Like
Yeah. And then lastly, another option that can kind of be in addition to all of this that Matt alluded to earlier is just limiting the total floor area for certain commercial uses to kind of help prevent overly large kind of box store type development that's more common in suburbs, kind of make it more of that neighborhood scale.
Can you give concrete examples so that we can remember?
So
What
30,000 square feet is a pretty typical limitation on that. That's about the size of a new seasons.
So Hargrove's Hardware here in Westland is 50,000 square feet.
So about the size of an Albertsons.
Correct.
Yeah.
Or
Or,
Same way.
Trader Joe's are 20.
People sort of 50 to so like 80 to 100.
So what's the
30
Trader
seems-
Joe's size?
20,000 square feet.
They tend to be like 30 or below.
This is just an example.
Mhm.
Maybe 40, 50.
Yeah.
Oh, 30 was just that you threw out the number.
Well, but it is one that we frequently see in codes or
Yeah.
recommend in codes because again, it is sort of equivalent to like a Trader Joe's or a new season market kind of size.
Yeah.
As opposed to a larger grocery store or a big box.
So you'd want to allow enough that you could potentially get like a Trader Joe's in there, but not too much that you would get something huge.
Exactly.
So.
Yeah. And that's that balance, right? It's like,
Yeah.
it's hard to tell where where that line
People
is.
would celebrate too, they would be so excited there's a Trader Joe's.
Oh, yeah.
So it would be such a good anchor.
There would be a welcome parade for Trader Joe's.
Would be,
Yeah.
yeah.
So thoughts on these ground floor commercial options. I think I generally heard that you agree with the don't require it for every ground floor space. But what about some of these other options? Should we, and it's a little more like, should we require a certain amount of it or just make it completely optional? I think.
Well, what are the pros and cons?
Yeah, I don't want to do an off the cuff on this one. This one's.
Well, I think that part of the goal in these areas is to create some commercial or retail development. And so if you don't require a certain amount of it, then you potentially end up with all
housing.
multifamily housing.
Yeah.
And that may not be a bad thing, but it's not mixed use, right? So if you're saying you want mixed use, then you probably do want to require a certain amount of that ground floor to be commercial or retail.
If we're going to Main Street feel, on specific areas, then that's when it makes more sense to be more targeted with it. So you really want to.
So can you give us some more concrete examples, or Chris can touch the screen? On required minimum percentage, or examples of what we can conceptualize as required for minimum percentage of total areas. We can perceive street frontage or required in specific areas. Can you kind of give us some examples of what that looks like that we can wrap our heads with?
I mean, in terms of the numbers that I would say I most often see in codes, it's somewhere between like 25 and 75% of the ground floor.
Like something we can see, like, oh, this neighborhood or this.
Oh, okay.
Does Willamette have that?
No.
I'm trying to think of some that are more.
Like the street, like Millennial, right, or Millennial Plaza, or whatever it's called, that street, that side street.
Yeah.
That has commercial in the bottom, and then, like, is that like a required thing?
I don't know what was required there. I'm just trying to think of like, what are some examples of where I see something?
I can think of
Right.
some examples, but they're not here. Like in
Right.
San Francisco neighborhoods, there's a little like bodega kind
Quarter
of
bodega, yeah.
convenience store on the corner, and the whole rest of the building is housing.
Right.
And it's within neighborhoods, so even if you don't live in the housing, if you live across the street or down the street, you can still go there. You can get a beer, you can get a soft drinks, you can get.
But that's still kind of a straight frontage model. So would total area, so let's say we're talking total area, would an example of that be, for example, so you have a multi-house or unit, except some of the units, and they don't have to be on the ground level, could be like one level, could be, let's say the third floor, could be therapist office, massage, accounting. I'm trying to spitball and give a concrete example so that we have something to work with.
Like, you
we
mean
really,
sorry.
well, I was just gonna say, we really are focused primarily on ground floor here. And, having something at upper floor wouldn't necessarily meet the ground floor requirement, because what you're trying to create is some energy on the ground floor.
Okay.
And so, but, if you want to think about a place where it's more of an area, maybe you could think of some neighborhoods in, let's say, more inner southeast or northeast Portland, where along the main street primarily, so let's think of maybe Subway, for instance. You've got some areas there where an entire block on either side of the street is retail or commercial. And then you go a block down and you get kind of a mix of some residential or buildings that are pure residential down to the ground floor. And next door is a food traffic. So that's an example, or, the Belmont neighborhood where you've got kind of a mix of or Belmont Street, that neighborhood where you've got some areas which are almost purely commercial and retail along either side of the street, but a half a block off, you've got residential, more pure residential. So think of like the old Belmont area now in H Barn. The back side of that is all residential, but the front side is that H Barn.
And then I think we then land.
Yeah.
Lynn's question was, what are the pros and cons?
Well, again, I think the con of requiring more than a certain amount is the market won't support more than a certain amount, and then those places end up vacant. That's the biggest con, is if you set your required percentage too high, then you just will not fill all the space.
So we have that here in West Lynn. They have a very large 12-acre property that is undeveloped.
Where is it?
Because of that, and it's across from Parker's Hardware, the big hill.
Yep.
The Parker property on the hillside, it's 12.5 acres, 12.4 acres. But in the OBC zone, you can do multifamily. But the entire, and it specifically says the entire first floor must be commercial use.
Oh, that'd be so weird. Okay.
So that's a lot of commercial use. The last time this came through was about 11 years ago. And they were trying to do 300 square feet of the first floors and the rest resident parking. And it was decided that that is not the entire first floor as commercial. So it was denied.
So
They had 4 separate buildings, and that's why it still sits vacant today.
So then the con of not requiring any or not requiring a certain percentage is that you don't create that mixed use energy you're trying to create.
Right.
You don't.
Just
there's
the local
not-
coffee
there's nothing
shop,
there for
the
somebody
high
else.
school.
So
Yeah, you get housing, but
get housing,
But they have to get
Might
their
be
cars to go somewhere to get stuff.
and there's not something along the street for people who are visiting or buying. Oh, yeah, that one's cool.
Or just too
So
big.
Matt, how would required minimum free, percentage of minimum area, like little minimum area? So we take the focus area and say 30% has to.
it'd be property by property.
Oh, property.
Yeah.
50% of the street
Generally,
frontage.
yeah, you generally do it by development site,
Okay.
it's property or.
You mean it's just a line item on, so we're gonna require this, but we're not establishing what it is.
I
No,
would,
What the percentage is.
Now, you would establish the percentage.
I would recommend a fairly small percentage, like 25%, because I think that way the developer can do whatever they want.
They can do more. Yeah, certainly they can do more.
It's a minimum, they can do the whole first floor and then housing.
I think that makes sense, particularly if we want to limit it to the properties that have the 43 frontage. That way, those ancillary ones, if they want to do a little like
All housing.
Yep.
tiny quad or something,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
then it's just housing and that's just fine. I think it's really the 43 that we're trying to activate, not the side streets.
I think that's, yeah.
It's a good take.
It's really
Yeah.
good.
So when you say required in specific areas, is that like if we took like one of those buildings that was in your rendering that was like it would be required in the building?
It could be
specific
like
areas, or-
on this corner.
Oh, I see, very
You are-
specific.
Yeah, or like on the map they had there. Vancouver
Or
has a
on the
shaded
map,
map.
you say
Oh,
this
okay.
shaded block.
It's not saying like, if there's like a plaza in the center, you have to put commercial around it. It's just talking about certain.
Yeah, you would just highlight on a map, these are the
Just
properties.
these areas.
So what Christine was saying
But I'm
is
not very honest.
like require it along
Yeah.
Highway 43, and then in the other parts, we allow them to.
Or it
just-
could be required a higher percentage of along 43. Meaning, I don't know that you would want to require all of the frontage in Highway 43. Saying that.
Yeah.
But I could see requiring a higher percentage, because like what I heard Councilor Bryce say was, like, keep the percentage relatively low, but you could.
But I'm saying only do her policy on 43.
So 25% fronting on 43,
Oh, I see.
the properties behind don't have a requirement. That's good.
So it can just be, it can just be whatever that.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Our someone
We
wants
saw
to do.
in the tour in Lake Oswego
That-
on Boone's Ferry, we saw that where there was commercial on Boone's Ferry and then there was townhouse.
So whatever the minimum.
Yeah,
requirement is.
The doctor's offices, yeah, that's right.
43, but not necessarily.
So you don't want us to decide what that is, just this sign
It's a
here.
concept.
We're not saying, oh, it should be the 8%.
No,
We're just
I'm
saying,
asking you
yeah,
about-
that concept is.
Yeah, okay, exactly. So I think, does everybody?
So the minimum.
Does that make sense?
It's more the minimum in the street, I believe, are the two
Yeah.
ones that we agreed on,
I
right?
think it's the minimum street frontage and.
And the minimum total.
And along 43 as opposed to off.
But no, Bo and Rob Henderson, do you have any comments about this?
Think I'm good.
Okay,
I'm all good here.
okay, all right, great, thanks.
Right, we do need to keep going. And
I sent, he responded and said he joined for a little bit, but
Okay, all right, well, let's just keep going.
yeah. Slides. talked about. Okay, so some of the key development standards. Talked about lot coverage a little bit already and maximum height. So lot coverage, kind of presented a few options here. First option would be not requiring any lot coverage. So this would allow the building to maximize the amount of the property that's being developed.
There would still be, I will say, other requirements that reduce it from covering the whole. So setbacks, landscaping, parking, but people are going to build a certain amount of parking in most places regardless. But so there are going to be some things that bring it below 100%.
Right. So, but this would just be one less kind of development restriction. So it gives a developer more flexibility. And I'll note that this is currently how it's treated for Willamette Falls Drive. So this is isn't unique for West Lynn. So another option would just be to dip it a little bit lower to 80%. So it's pretty high lot coverage.
These are maximums. You don't have to build to this, but it would allow you to build up to 80%.
Right. So just provides more flexibility. And then the third option is kind of a hybrid approach of just varying it by use. So a mixed use development, multifamily, which typically demands being developed at higher coverage, would be allowed that higher coverage, whereas other lower use, less intensive uses would have a lower maximum coverage. So thoughts on coverage?
I have a question. Just because boundaries, let's test some. Can we go higher?
What do you mean?
Higher than 55 feet?
Yeah, so we're not on height yet. We're just
on lot
coverage. And then we'll talk about height.
Praise be.
Well, now we know what you're gonna say.
I would say generally what we're trying to, but to your question a little bit, what we're trying to do is create a mixed use zone that we would apply to all of these areas where we've identified. And I don't, you could vary the height in each of those zones, but then you gotta create multiple zones. That's not what we've been assuming, but it's not out of the question. Let's first talk about lot coverage.
Well, I think about like what people said they wanted and, gathering places is one of those. So that's really what I think about when I think about lot coverage is how that affect the gathering places that exist. If we don't have enough gathering places, it's not going to be a successful district. I think it's just going to be like, oh, it's just another pass through. So that's the piece where I wonder, like, requirement ends up being beneficial in the long run because it's a more desirable place to be.
Well, and again, so let me try to clarify this one.
Yeah.
We're not saying require the entire lot to be covered by buildings. And we're not saying under. We're not saying require the whole thing to be 80%. We're saying that's the maximum I'll allow.
Yeah.
What I think I hear you saying is, well, if you allow the whole thing to be covered, then you don't, and if that's what somebody wants to do,
Right.
then you don't
You
get the
can't stop
gathering space.
Yeah.
You can't stop.
You don't want a massive block on a whole, like a
So,
massive.
so
building.
maybe we want to make sure we
wanted to create a
some space.
neighborhood really there. Like that's, I think, ultimately like a neighborhood over 43. It's maybe a little more urban feeling, but
But like on, Willamette, you do have, you don't have all those buildings fronting for the whole block.
yeah, but it's on a nice quiet street instead of a highway.
And that corners are huge. with little
Well,
beautiful
compared to 43.
benches.
Yeah, it depends on the design.
Some of those parcels were real small and weird shaped. I would feel really weird saying 80% max because you get a small parcel and then 80% max. What am I gonna do there?
Good point.
Yeah, one of the things I'd say real quickly is the gathering spaces question. In the work we've done going out to the community, a lot of that was either formalize a space we already own that's just an overgrown lot of nothing, which we have a few of those along. The other was talking a little bit about design buildings up to the highway, so that places like Backyard Burger wouldn't have their patio on the highway. They'd have it out back where they would formalize that gathering space. So I think you'll see in design, people, developers want, if you're this type of development, they want to create sidewalk cafes. They want to create a patio. Just look at Lenny Park. There's huge cafes and patios there by design.
Could we define, okay, it's a definition of defining community. So for example, convenience stores are very popular. There throughout Cascadia, and they act as community hubs for teenagers. Geeks don't want to be out in the sun, but they want, so, but it effectively acts as a communal gathering space for them. But if they were to take up the entirety of that space, they're going to be gathering and communing, et cetera, but they're going to do it fluorescent lights or LED appropriate lights. But it would still be meeting the definition of it would be a community gathering, but they just don't want to be in the sun. I don't know. I'm just kind of realizing Christine's comment, which was really smart, and like trying to figure out, how do we weigh this? If it's still, so could we make it 80%? As long as it's, if it fills the 20%, as long as that 20% is still devoted towards communal gathering, even if it isn't outdoors.
Well, they might be parking too.
I don't know.
I think that.
I think that would be a very challenging thing working to a set of development requirements.
I know. Spitballing.
Yeah. I'm answering your question. Pretty challenging.
I think option
maybe.
one, because I think we can get other requirements, for example, with setbacks and landscaping requirements.
Right. A lot of times when you see no lot coverage, you can cover 100%. In a lot of cases, like in ours, you remove the setbacks, right? The food cart pod, the Willamette Garage is a 10,000 square foot property. They actually could have literally built a 10,000 square foot building on that property. No setbacks required, no parking required. They could have gone 35 feet, 100%. But then it does limit your gathering, it does limit your communal space, right? So.
And on the next couple slides, we do have examples of design open space standards.
Oh,
Yeah.
right. I know how it's going to get bent. Will developers then use the rooftop access as their definition of their space?
No.
The
Not
planning
necessarily.
commission was already watching this happen. So
It depends on how you write the code standard.
Okay.
So is there a reason to do
Not necessarily.
none versus vary by use?
Well, now you've got to define all the uses, right?
Yeah, because so defining all the uses is just more complex and like.
The technical word is kinda.
I mean,
It seems to me like it would be great to just kind of go with none and then get at the open space through other ways. And that would give,
and I think you will.
I mean, one of the things we need to think about is rather than what we want is what, what's going to be financially, I mean, we do need to think about what we want, but what is someone going to build for us? What the cost, they're going to need freedom.
So
Stuff.
If what we want is so restrictive
Yeah.
that nobody builds anything, and we didn't get what we want.
That's why we go to 55 feet then.
So Lynn, say your example, so we say none, but is there some sort of benefit that could be given if they did meet the 80%? So the requirement is none, but if they met 80% or whatever, that there would be some sort of benefit they gained.
I don't think that, I think that makes it overly complicated.
Yeah, I think
For
to the extent you want things like outdoor gathering spaces, there are ways to incentivize that potentially, but you wouldn't work them into the lot coverage requirements. You'd work them into other standards.
Well,
Okay, well,
Chris and
I
Lynn are the
support
ones-
that if
I
we
know,
put
but
it in.
Chris and Lynn are the ones to ask this question to. Not me. So that's why I was asking.
So
What about
I'm getting
incentive?
into one,
Incentivize
because
it.
we've got one more
Yeah.
slide, and we've got transportation stuff, and what I'm
We gotta go
hearing
back.
is generally one.
We haven't talked about height.
Yes, we haven't talked about height, but I'm hearing more support for no maximum lot coverage to get at those other things, the other standards. I mean, I still have a majority.
Yeah.
I support that if there's a way to do that.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, let's talk about max height, and then we'll see what we can accomplish, I think.
Yeah, so max height, similar, scenario one, based on what we've shared in the visualizations, would be really the existing maximum height for the general commercial zone. Just applying that across the board for all the mixed use areas. And then scenario two is bumping that up to 55 feet and kind of illustrate that here in the graphic. Or scenario three would be to vary it based on location. Kind of what we proposed initially would be higher maximum height closer to 43 and then step it down closer or away from 43 so that it's kind of less impactful on the neighborhoods nearby. So thoughts on on those options.
Quick explanation. Right now, the existing commercial zone, I believe the wording is if you're within 50 feet of a residential zone, you cannot be above 35 feet. Well, most of our commercial properties are within 50 feet of a residential zone. So that's why we get stuck. We are stuck. We're getting a single story car wash. We're stuck. We need to expand upward. The other thing I would say is when you start, and Matt and Brandon can speak more to this, we don't have to get into it. But when you get above 5 stories, developers don't build 6-story buildings. It's too expensive, and you have fire, life safety, and elevators. They need 8 to make their nut, to make their money. So it's sort of like if you're going to go above 5 stories, you got to go way above 5 stories, or it's never happening, right?
So only if we were trying to create a specific industrial or office area portion of West End, which we are not.
That's not our goal, no. And we haven't talked to anyone about that. We've talked about sort of this 45, 55 zone, right? Getting us here and sort of not worrying about we got to get above that 35-foot height limit if we want to see anything different than what we have.
The answers are given because people will ask about it. Wow, I have information.
And you have something, yeah, right.
As opposed to,
Yeah. So anyway, just that was a quick little thought, some thoughts.
Yeah, that's where I'm.
Where you would step back
Yeah.
for the residential.
Yeah.
Especially to get it get buy-in.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking, when you look from the highway, like towards the river, you've got 60, 70, 80-foot tall trees.
Yeah.
So-
Well, and that's what this is showing, right? I mean, here's the highway and here's the residential homes.
Yeah.
So that's what they're showing here is that step down, just to make it a little less big.
So would 55 feet obstruct all views of Mount Hood as you're driving on?
Every view, no.
No, I mean, no, they're not. I mean, on 43, you can see Mount Hood. But if it's just a wall of
But it's
55
only those zones.
Only the focus areas.
3 zones. You've still got all that
That's,
space
yeah,
in
this is
between.
a long corridor.
That's right.
In these areas, and that's why we sort of
Focus.
landed on that
Yeah.
approach.
Yeah,
Focus
sorry.
areas.
to tell you the truth,
It's a fair
lot of
question,
those
yeah,
buildings-
for sure.
Commercial buildings are currently empty.
And 55 feet, is that a 5-story building?
Yes, that will get you 5, which is the front side of that building right there.
Is that the size of that massive office or whatever by?
Bird Street
Market?
Library.
Yeah.
No, that's a 2-story structure. I think it's about 35.
Yeah, I think it's 35.
It's a perspective thing. It's the way
Yeah, the
It's built
slopes.
up. It's like you're from the street you're looking at as though it's a double.
Right, if you're on the downhill side, yeah, it looks pretty big, yeah.
So it's like, looking at people are leaning towards number 3. I mean, this is just still conceptual. We'll come back in more detail.
And ask for more than just the people in this room.
Right.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely.
Yeah, and then the 55 along 43, makes a ton of sense, so.
Well, again, there might be sections where it's not 55, maybe 50, 48, but it's giving them that flexibility to move upward,
Okay, let's move along.
And the apartments on top will have an awesome view of that.
That is true.
Some will, yeah.
All right, so a few other development standards. So setbacks, one option is to apply equally across all properties in these focus areas or vary it by use. So similar to the frontage and coverage. Option 3 would be varied by frontage or pedestrian zone. So similar to mixed use frontages like what we were discussing earlier. Or vary by type of use, or mixed use or multifamily. And then all other uses would just kind of defer to the neighboring zone to kind of allow for more of a natural transition in terms of development intensity. So thoughts here on setbacks, and we provide another example here of regulates their frontages and setbacks based on what street the property fronts on.
This is how we get some of the gathered places, right? Yeah, that setback.
Yeah.
See, and I would think like with your, I guess I'm thinking varied by location, because I'm thinking, here we are looking at 43. We want to max the height and max the distance from 43, but it's actually set back more than other areas potentially, so that you have more sidewalk and vegetation before you have the building. I don't know. Am I thinking about it? Am I using the wrong?
So right now, we're set back a long ways from 43, right? I mean, Walmart must be 100 feet from 43.
Oh, yeah. that's
And
not
then what you get is a sea of parking.
No, we don't want that.
Right, so it's the other way around. You actually want to bring the buildings up closer, creating a corridor.
And the sidewalks are typically the right of way, so that's already been predetermined.
I'm not understanding what the setback.
Yeah.
But-
Just from the sidewalk or the building.
Okay.
But,
Oh, boy. What are the setbacks on the land?
On Main Street,
Main Street?
none. You can build right up to the backside of the sidewalk.
But it feels like a huge setback.
Because it's wide.
Yeah, because we have a 15-foot sidewalk and a 12-foot bike lane.
Oh, yeah, so maybe that's what I'm getting at, is a wide sidewalk.
So that's all right of way. That's all city-owned property.
So we
well,
can
but
make it only as wide as we own.
You have time for the street when it gets approved in the future, especially.
Yeah.
And that does include a relatively wide sidewalk already.
Yeah.
So that's already kind of built into this. I think, our thinking is you want to allow some setback, not required zero, you know, so that there was space for additional space for outdoor seating, you know, benches or whatever.
Okay.
Landscape.
Okay.
But you do want to bring things at least closer than, let's say, Walmart, right? So that you do create more, but you see people that, like, there's just more of a. And then the question is, okay, do you want to allow for bigger setbacks?
Oh, I see.
You know, vice versa.
That's why you have the max. Okay.
Yeah.
question with the boulevard design, does the future streetscape design anticipate any purchasing of new right of way along the way? Because if so, we should require that amount of setback. Otherwise, somebody's gonna build something before we actually buy the right of way, and then we're gonna try and buy what we find we're gonna build.
Yeah, the 2016 concept plan does not have any purchase of right of way.
So we're building only within the current right of way.
Yeah, which fluctuates the entire length of the
It's
corridor.
narrow for 10
It does, yeah, which is why like a uniform stretch doesn't work because it won't work. So, yeah, it does not include, I shouldn't say, there's a few little frontage roads and things like that, but in general, that doesn't include a buyout for right of way.
It's important to look.
It is,
forward.
yeah, 100%, yeah, 100%.
I guess I would just ask generally, is it, do people have any thoughts? This one's just kind of a little bit of a hard one, without more sort of graphics or, but just 1 versus 3, I think varied by use would be a challenge, but 1 versus 3 varied by location. Do people think it makes more sense to potentially allow more or less on Highway 43 than on the side streets?
Yes.
Yes.
So kind of varied by location.
Just like how we want to vary the height of the buildings up
Yeah.
before you vary the setback.
Does it make more sense to apply an equal setback everywhere within a mixed-use area, or apply more or less flexibility along 43 versus a side street?
So if we applied it equally along specifically just 43, it would low. But applying it, you're off 43. Probably needs it more depth.
You just, yes, or you could think of it as off of 43, you give people more flexibility in terms of how far their buildings are.
So number 3 is what we are bringing.
I think so, yeah. And I think it's more sort of the 3A, but not necessarily the same.
So we kind of pair this with those zones likely.
Okay, so I think I give this enough to kind of move forward and bring back something that like shows you what that.
Until to be determined.
Yeah.
I almost feel like with the neighborhood though, not 43, but the 43, you shouldn't have a max setback because so many of those buildings are adjacent to a residential that's not in this new zone. And we should allow them to not be too far off the setback of their neighbor. So if they want to do a triplet or a quad, let them have a reasonable setback beyond 15 feet, so they match their neighbor.
There might still be a max, but it wouldn't be, you know, it could be.
15 is a very, I mean, it's a very small front yard, which is fine, but it's not fine if your neighbor then has.
You might not want to allow up to 50 feet. You know what I'm saying? Like there might be a max, but you're talking it's bigger.
Yeah.
And that's why we vary it. Yeah.
And there was a development on Willamette Falls Drive that was building a new thing that's got to be right up at the sidewalk, whereas the existing house that's not being torn down is set back. And right now, it looks a little weird. As other development happens, it'll probably look fine. But in looking at that, when that came to the council, I was like, it looks like this big overpowering thing right by the sidewalk, but it's because the house on this side that is staying is still set back, and the ranch house on the other side is still set back. It just looks weird. But I think eventually it'll look normal.
Okay, I'm gonna have to do a time check again because we have 6 minutes left in this meeting. And we have not talked about any of the pedestrian bike improvements.
That's the most important part.
I'm gonna move it. Is that okay?
Well, yeah, I think a couple things. I think we should discuss, I think before we go racing through, it's something that's come up recently on another piece of this project. I think we should stop for a minute and discuss kind of next steps because I do not want to race through to get, I want us to think thoroughly about what we're talking about and not just get quick answers because that ends up getting us where we don't want to be.
So I want to say, yeah, maybe we want to schedule a second
So
solid.
I think what I'd like to do is probably, we'll figure it out, but maybe come back in 3 or 4 weeks and sort of finish this meeting possibly. And just kind of add it into the list if that's, if you guys are into that. But again, I really want us to think thoughtfully through this process, not just get it done.
This is like the biggest.
This is where the rubber hits the road.
Really
Yeah.
important.
Everything we've been working on, this is what's gonna be in 10 years when I'll be sitting at my desk looking at, does it meet these requirements? That's what we're writing right now.
Yeah.
And so this is how you get what we want. And so I don't want to be just
That's a great.
powering through.
Oh, like I wish we had spent another meeting. Damn it.
Yeah, you're right. Well, no, it's so,
Giving you that option.
but now you have, yeah, and so what we could do is, and I think, I think Brandon and Matt and Lynn and I can kind of step back and say, okay, let's do another sort of a 4.5, meeting 4.5. And maybe it's finishing this agenda, but also a little bit of a recap.
Yeah.
Just so you can marinate on what we've talked about and come back with any thoughts that you may have.
Yeah.
So I think that would be the more, my preference and approach. If you guys are open to doing that. Because, this is a really,
Yeah, I'm up
really
for that.
important.
I think
Really
I still
important.
have like my brain is trying to wrap around
Yeah.
the Walmart area.
Yeah,
And I'm like, I don't know, do we really want, like, what do we really want that to be?
yeah.
Because I'm thinking like, oh, we're trying to protect the residents and that's great, but also, what do we really want?
Yeah.
So, and I'm still not sold on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, not to mention transportation stuff, crosswalks, like we have a lot left.
We knew we had too much.
Yeah, well, we're enthusiastic.
That's okay. Yeah.
And we push.
Well, we've also got a good group here that has.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I've got to say, I've loved, this has been a really positive, this has been great. This is exactly what I was hoping we'd be getting into now. And it's just, we're starting to be able to chew on it, which is exciting. So I appreciate the efforts today. Truly, I think everyone brought something to the table. So this has been exciting for me. Personally, just as a planning nerd, this is great stuff.
Hey, Lynn, you want to check in with Bo?
Oh, yes, sir. Turn it
And
away.
just make sure they're comfortable with that approach.
Yep.
You're good with that, Rob?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Excellent.
Keep up the work.
Okay, cool.
Don't stop now.
All right.
Sorry, Matt.
Yeah, sorry, Matt Bell. You came for nothing.
No problem.
Things to do.
Matt says no problem. Thank you.
All
Matt.
right. We'll bring you back, Matt Bell.
25. So
There is, spring breaks coming up.
Yeah, we'll make sure we get through that. Building right or two after that kind of a thing, not too far out. But yeah, this is exciting stuff, but very, very important. And again, remember the process, the decisions we make here are not final. We're not the decision making. Well, actually, Councilor Bright will be part of the final decision making authority. But this will get vetted many, many times through, but I think it's really important to come out of the working group with a really solid set of what we're after, or what we think the community is after, I should say. And something that we can thought through, so.
And even after our next meeting, we'll have one more meeting to go over the actual proposed text.
Yep. Yeah, so that's, and that'll be a bulky little packet of information, a lot of reading. So we'll try and put that out earlier, so you have even a little bit more time to fight your way through it. And then eventually David and the PC will get a chance at it, so you're getting previews of it. And of course, lands on Councilor Bright and our other councilors at the end, so. Well, okay, the room is only about 88 degrees, so I think we will ask for some more air conditioning next time. All right.
Now it's gonna get cold again.
Right, exactly. Cool spring, right? Tricks us every time.
Yeah.
All right, thank you guys very, very much. Appreciate the conversation, really productive today. Thank you guys for joining us. We'll get some, and we'll do another one. Awesome, thank you guys.